Assalamu alaikum class. Today we will start with the hearing physiology. By the end of this topic, these should be your learning objectives. That you should be able to describe the components and functions of external, middle, and inner ear. Um, Explain the roles of tympanic membrane and the auditory ossicles in sound transmission. You should be able to describe the way uh, that movements of molecules in the air they are converted into impulses generated in hair cells in the cochlea. Also, you should be able to explain how pitch and loudness they are coded in the auditory pathways. And you should be able to describe the components of auditory pathway from right from the cochlear hair cells to the cerebral cortex. Now, what is hearing or audition? Hearing is the neural perception of sound energy, and it involves two aspects: what and where. Based on this definition or introduction, auditory system has certain functions which are identification and localization of sound and ultimately the communication. If you're talking about sound identification, it would mean what is it? What is the frequency and intensity of this sound? And then you have to localize the sound, that from where it is coming. And this function is performed by the auditory system through analyzing two differences, which are interaural timing difference and interaural frequency difference. So these were the main functions of auditory system. The organ which is used by audition or for hearing, that is ear, as you all know. And ear consists of external, middle, and inner ear. The neural receptors for hearing, they are present in the inner ear. Now we will look at the functions of ear as a whole. Ear has dual function because the inner ear it contains two contiguous hair cell based sensory systems. The two functions which your ear performs are hearing the mechanical vibrations of sound, for which your auditory system uses hair cells to, to transduce the vibrations which are generated by the sound waves. And the second function is maintaining equilibrium, both while moving and while staying still. For this purpose, the vestibular system it uses hair cells to transduce the head movements. So these were the overall functions of ear. Now we will have a look of at the functions of ear part wise. External ear collects and transfers the sound waves to the middle ear, while middle ear it transfers the vibrations of tympanic membrane to the fluid which is present in the cochlea. Inner ear, which is the main part, it houses the sensory system for hearing. Then again, the inner ear, it also has vestibular apparatus, which houses the sensory systems for equilibrium, and it provides input, which is essential for maintaining the posture and balance, right? So that was the brief overview of the organ of hearing and the sense of hearing as a whole. Now we will start with the physiology of hearing. What is sound? Sound is a form of energy, and it is a traveling vibration of air molecules parallel to the direction of propagation. Sound wave consists of alternate regions of compression and rarefaction of air molecules. As you can see in this diagram, there are regions of compression here, and then there are areas of rarefaction where the air molecules they are quite dispersed. Any device that produce such pattern of vibrations that becomes a source of sound. Here in this figure, you can easily see the areas of compression of air molecule and the areas where the air molecules they are dispersed. So the sound wave that consists of these alternate regions of compression and rarefaction. Let's have a look at some more sound facts. The velocity of sound, it depends on the medium through which the sound waves they are passing. For example, in air, the velocity is around 330 to 332 meters per second. So, what's your guess? What would be the velocity of sound in water? Will it be greater or lower? That's a question for you. Take it as an assignment. Then, another fact is that sound waves they need a medium for conduction. So the sound waves they cannot pass through vacuum, and that's a relief because otherwise we would be hearing the cosmic blasts taking place in space. All right. The sound waves, they move at constant speed unless there are certain conditions, that unless they are moving through different mediums, or they are moving in mediums of different temperatures, or unless the source creating the sound that is moving, for example, a moving train or a moving ambulance, etc. In that case, the change in the speed, that is perceived pitch due to moving source, and this effect, this is called a Doppler shift, right? Now we will have a look at certain characteristics of sound, which are pitch, intensity, and timbre. And these characteristics, they are perceived only by an auditory analyzer. So the three characteristics we will look into detail of which these are pitch, intensity, and timbre. What is pitch? Pitch measures the frequency of vibrations of source of sound waves. So basically pitch is vibrating cycles per second, right? A higher pitch means greater frequency, and that actually means that more waves, they are crammed into uh, each second of time. The pitch is expressed in hertz. The audible range of sound frequency, that is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. The term infrasound, it refers to the frequencies below 16 hertz, while ultrasound refers to the frequencies above 20,000 hertz. And you know that ultrasound, that is used to study the internal structure and morphology of the organs. Now, this pitch discrimination, that is best analyzed in 1000 to 3000 hertz range. Interestingly, children and women, they have a high pitch sound as compared to males. The average conversation voice frequency, that is around 120 hertz in males and 250 hertz in females. Moreover, sound waves, they can be absorbed by objects in the surrounding. Higher frequencies, which are having smaller wavelengths, they are absorbed more than the lower frequencies. Now, while we are studying or discussing this certain characteristic of sound, the pitch, there is a phenomenon which I would like to tell you, that is called masking phenomenon. The presence of one sound decreases an individual's ability to hear other sounds. And this phenomenon is known as masking phenomenon. In this phenomenon, the degree to which one sound masks other, that is related to the pitch of the sound. And the significance of this masking phenomenon is that this effect, the masking effect of the background noise, that raises the auditory threshold. Now, what is this auditory threshold? How do you define auditory threshold? It is the sound level below which a healthy person's ear that is unable to detect any sound. And keep in mind that it is quite different for different frequencies. The auditory threshold will be different for higher frequencies from the lower frequencies. And a threshold shift, that is an increase in the hearing threshold for a particular sound frequency. So that was about auditory threshold and the masking phenomenon. Now we jump on to the next characteristic of sound, which is the intensity of sound. It is the measure of the loudness of the sound waves, and it depend on the amplitude of the wave. Basically, it describes that how much energy a wave is carrying. If the wave is carrying more energy, the amplitude will be higher and the wave will be taller. So, intensity depend on the pressure difference between the regions of compression and rarefaction. Remember, I told you that the sound wave that consists of alternate regions of compression and rarefaction. So the pressure difference, which is existing between these two regions, because in the area of rarefaction there will be minimum pressure, and in the area of compression there will be highest pressure. The difference that determines the intensity of the sound wave. Within the hearing range, if the intensity of the sound wave is greater, then the sound will be louder. And the sound intensity, it is measured in a unit which is called decibel. Our ordinary conversation at 6 to 8 feet, that is held at 50 to 60 decibels. All right, so when I'm telling you this intensity thing, there is another effect which I would like to mention, that is called the binaural effect. Now, what is this binaural effect? The ability to detect the position of the source of sound with both ears, that is called binaural effect. For example, when we want to localize a sound which is coming from a distance, we we turn our head until the sound is equally loud in two ears. So the direction in which we are facing, that is the direction of sound's origin. Okay. And one more thing, which could be your Viva question, is the sound reference, a standard sound reference. Uh, it means the, you can say, faintest audible sound. And it corresponds to 0 decibel at a certain pressure. That pressure level is around very 0. Maybe 0.0002 dynes per square centimeter. Anyway, so this sound reference, this is basically the minimum sound intensity that can be perceived by a normal person, right? Keep in mind that a 0 decibel sound, that is not inaudible, but it is just audible. Okay. All right, so that was about the pitch and the loudness. Uh, Another characteristic of sound, that is timbre. This property refers to the sensation perceived when we hear a mixture of the related frequencies. Uh, it is the quality of the sound which depend upon overtones. Now, what are overtones? Overtones are basically the additional frequencies which are superimposed on the fundamental tone. You can see in the diagram. I give you an example that the same note which is played on different musical instruments, that is perceived or it sound differently. So it is this quality of the sound, the timbre, which enables the listener to distinguish the source of the sound wave. Uh, right. So I think this should be enough for now. And next time we will start with the physiologic anatomy of ear. If you have any questions, you can ask me directly and we can discuss that. So let's start with the physiologic anatomy of ear today. As you can see in the figure, that three parts of ear, they are color coded. The blue color, it shows the inner ear, which consists of cochlea and the vestibular apparatus. Um, the cochlea is for hearing, while the vestibular apparatus is concerned with the balance, which further consists of the vestibule itself and the semicircular canals. Uh, you can see in the figure that the pink portion, that consists of the middle ear cavity, which is an air filled cavity. It shows auditory ossicles, which are the bones, three bones present in the middle ear cavity. Uh, while the eardrum, the tympanic membrane, that sometimes is considered a part of the middle ear and sometimes that of the external ear. And then comes the uh, this orange or mustard color, and that is the external ear, which consists of external auditory canal and the auricle. Now, the whole structure that is embedded in the temporal bone, uh, which has an important structure, the mastoid process. And I will tell you the function of mastoid process also, which is involved in hearing to some extent. I give you little detail of these parts now. External ear or outer ear, it acts as a funnel to channel the sound waves to the eardrum, as a result of which the eardrum it vibrates. Outer ear, it's not necessary for hearing, but still it helps. Now, the external ear, it consists of mainly three parts: auricle, external auditory canal, and the tympanic membrane. Right. Auricle, it's a flap of elastic cartilage which is covered by skin, and the rim of the auricle, that is called helic, while the inferior portion, that is called lobule, that you guys already know. Moving on to the external auditory canal, this external auditory canal, this is a curved tube of around 2.5 centimeter long, and it is covered by epidermis, and it is lined by simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay, it lies in temporal bone, and it leads from auricle to the eardrum. They say that near the external opening, the canal, it contains a few hair and the ceruminous glands. These ceruminous glands, they secrete ear wax. Uh, Regarding function, the combination of hair and this cerumen, it helps prevent dust and the foreign objects from entering the ear. So these were the parts of external ear. Now, which functions the external ear performs? Your external ear uh, functions for sound collection and localization, and for increasing the pressure on the tympanic membrane in a frequency sensitive way. The next part is the tympanic membrane, which sometimes is considered a part of external as well as of the middle ear. You can see the eardrum in the figure as seen through the otoscope. The tympanic membrane, it's a very thin membrane, and It has a diameter of around 0.1 millimeter. Basically, it is composed of connective tissue, which is covered on one side by the skin and on the other side by a single layer of the cells of mucous membrane. And this membrane, it moves to and fro while it is buckled in the regions between the manubrium of malleus and the anterior and posterior edges. When the tympanic membrane vibrates, this vibration is greatest on the inferior edges of the tympanic membrane. What is the role of tympanic membrane? So your tympanic membrane, it acts as a resonator. What does it mean? It means that it vibrates in response to sound waves. So it transmits the sound waves to the ossicular system of the middle ear, the system which consists of three bones of the middle ear. Do you know what is resonance? Resonance, it's a tendency of a system to oscillate with larger amplitude at some frequencies than at others. Now we will move on to the middle ear. As I already told you that the middle ear, it's an air-filled cavity. And it's a small cavity in the bone, which is lined by the epithelium, and it is filled with air. And interestingly, middle ear, it communicates with your nasopharynx through the eustachian tube. This eustachian tube, it is also called auditory tube. Right. So the auditory tube, uh, normally it is kept closed at its pharyngeal end, and it opens only during swallowing and yawning, or um, voluntarily through the Valsalva maneuver. Since it opens in the nasopharynx, it may allow a pathway for infections also, especially in small children, because in children, this tube is more horizontal. So when they lie down and they are feeding, the infection, it may travel from the throat to the ear. But these children, they grow out of most of the middle ear problems as this tube lengthens, and when the face enlarges and the tube lengthens and it becomes more vertical. What is the function of the eustachian tube? So it performs mainly two functions. It acts to equalize the pressure between the middle ear and the environment, and also drains mucus. So, what other structures your middle ear contains? There are three ossicles, mean three bones, named malleus, incus, and stapes. There are two muscles, tensor tympani and stapedius, and a nerve, which is the cauda tympani branch of the facial nerve. One by one, we will discuss these. So, first, moving on to the bones, malleus. The word malleus, it's a Latin word which is used for hammer, and it is the first bone of the middle ear. Um, Now, the handle of the malleus that is attached with the internal surface of eardrum, and head of the malleus that is attached with the body of the next bone, that is incus. So, what function it performs? The primary function of the malleus, that is the transmission of sound waves or vibrations from the eardrum to the next bone, that is incus. So, what does incus do? Incus, which is sometimes also called anvil, it is the second bone in the chain, and it is located in between the malleus and the stapes. And the incus, it transmits the vibrations from the malleus to the stapes. All right, stapes, which acts as stirrup. Interesting bit about stapes is that it is the smallest and the lightest bone of the human body, and on one end it connects to incus, while on the other end it connects with oval window. And the foot plate, or you may call it the face plate, which is the base of the stapes, that fits into the oval window of the internal ear, right? And what is the function of the stapes? That is the transmission of sound waves from the incus to the membrane of inner ear. Then I told you that there are two muscles which are the components of the middle ear, and those were the tensor tympani muscle and the stapedius muscle. Right. So the as far as the tensor tympani muscle is concerned, it runs in a canal along the roof of eustachian tube, and its tendon that attaches to the handle of the malleus, and the muscle is plied by the mandibular branch of trigeminal nerve. So whenever there is the nerve is somehow involved in a disease process, say like in Bell's palsy, and there is paralysis, uh, this muscle is also affected, as a result of which some degree of hearing loss is observed. Well, the next muscle is stapedius muscle. The stapedius, that is the smallest skeletal muscle in the body, and it is plied by the branch of the facial nerve, And as the name is suggesting, it attaches with stapes, and its contraction is a reflex contraction. So the contraction, this muscle, it contracts. The contraction of this muscle, that is initiated by the loud sounds as a reflex, and because of this contraction it limits the potential damage which is caused by the loud sound or noise. Because whenever this muscle contracts, it pulls the stapes posteriorly and it tilts its foot plate. So the vibrations, they are not that much amplified and not transmitted as such to the inner ear. So this is how the inner ear that is protected from the loud sound. Now, what is this oval window? Basically, it's a membrane covered opening which leads from the middle ear to the vestibule of the inner ear. This oval window, that is an intersection of the middle ear with the inner ear, and it is as I already told you, it is directly contacted by the stapes. So by the time the vibrations they reach the oval window, they have been amplified over 10 times from what they were when they contacted the tympanic membrane. There is not only oval window, but there is also another window which is called round window. Now, this round window, it functions as a pressure relief port for the fluid which was set into motion initially by the movement of the stapes in the oval window. Okay. So I told you that the major part of the ear that is embedded in the bone, in the temporal bone. And then I mentioned that the mastoid process that also is to some extent involved in the hearing process. Now this mastoid process, that's a bony ridge behind the auricle, right? And um, I find it interesting that this is the hardest bone in the body. Now, what are the functions of mastoid process? It protects the cochlea and the vestibular apparatus, and also provides support to the external ear and the posterior wall of the middle ear cavity. And it contains ear cavities, which are also called the ear cells. But unfortunately, these cavities, they can also be a reservoir of infection. But the ear cells which are present in it, they perform certain functions. So the ear cells, they act as a air reservoir for the middle ear, and they also function for protecting the labyrinth from the temperature variations. So it means that they act also as the insulating chambers. And finally, they provide resonance to the sound. So I told you about the bones, muscles, and the mastoid process. Now, how do the bones of the middle ear, or we call them ossicles, how do they function? The ossicles of middle ear, they conduct the sound from the tympanic membrane to the cochlea. And what is the mechanism of this ossicular functioning? I will tell you in detail that how do these ossicles of the chain of the bones, they function to conduct the sound from the tympanic membrane to the cochlea, that in such a way that the handle of the malleus that is attached to the center of the tympanic membrane. And keep in mind that this point of attachment, that is constantly pulled by the tensor tympani muscle, so that the tympanic membrane, it is kept taut or tensed. Why it is kept taut? Because this tautness or tension, it allows the sound vibrations on any portion of the membrane to be transmitted to the ossicles. Then the malleus, that is bound to incus by minute ligaments in such a way that whenever the malleus moves, the incus that moves with it. And the opposite end of the incus, that articulates with the stem of the stapes, right? While the as I already told you, that the foot plate or the face plate of the stapes, that lies against the membranous labyrinth of the cochlea in the opening of the oval window. So the whole ossicular chain, it moves like a piston. So this is how the bony chain, they conduct the sound waves right from the tympanic membrane to the inner ear, which is cochlea. As a whole, middle ear performs these functions, that it transfers the vibratory movements of the tympanic membrane to the inner ear. And very important function of the middle ear is that it provides impedance matching, which I will tell you in detail. And then it protects the inner ear from the loud sounds, and that is achieved through a reflex which is called tympanic reflex. Finally, your middle ear, it provides a phase differential effect which is called the ossicular coupling. Now, what is this ossicular coupling? Hmm. You see that the sound waves which strike the tympanic membrane, they do not reach the oval and the round windows simultaneously. There is always a preferential pathway to the oval window, and that is because of the ossicular chain. So this phenomenon, it couples the sound preferably to only one window of the cochlea, and as a result of which a differential pressure that is produced between two windows, and that is called ossicular coupling. Why do we need this pressure difference between the oval and the round window? This is required for the movement of the cochlear fluids. And how the acoustic separation is achieved at that between the two windows, the acoustic separation that is achieved by actually two factors: by an intact tympanic membrane and by the presence of a cushion of air around the round window, right? So because of this separation, the ossicular coupling that is achieved, and it has a significance because it contributes to the loudness around 4 decibel when the but keep in mind that the tympanic membrane should be intact for that contribution. So this ossicular coupling that contributes around 4 decibel to the loudness of the sound. Right, and then there is also another mechanism which is called acoustic coupling. Okay, so this is another mechanism for the sound stimulation of the inner ear, and how it is different from the ossicular coupling, because this acoustic coupling that results from the middle ear's acoustic sound pressure. Now this sound pressure, I told you, the middle ear acoustic sound pressure, that is that is produced due to the motion of the tympanic membrane and the sound pressure in the ear canal. Since the cochlear windows, they are separated by a few millimeters, the acoustic sound pressure at the oval and the round window, they are not identical because they are only by a few millimeters they are separated. Now this difference in the sound pressure between the two windows, that is called acoustic coupling, right? And that was different from the ossicular coupling. Both these ossicular and the acoustic coupling, they contribute to the loudness of the sound perceived or heard or received in the internal ear. So that was one of the functions of the middle ear. I